अस्सलाम वालेकुम बच्चों। जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम एवरीबॉडी, कैसे हैं आप सब? खैरियत से हैं?
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
चलिए जी जरा एक आधा मिनट वेट कर लेते हैं so that all of the others can join in inshallah, then we will begin. Okay. हाँ जी, अस्सलाम वालेकुम once again everybody, those who joined in. Just wait for one more minute. The others will join inshallah, and then we will formally begin. Question 6. Okay. Chalaji, before we begin, let me quickly give you what plan do I have today. Initially, मैंने message to किया था that we will do exam style questions, past papers, and then begin with the new topic. But I think I was going through some of the practice questions. I think it's very appropriate that we spend good time on practice today. So I may spend the entire lesson doing just practice questions today for topic 1, sorry, for topic unit 2 that we did yesterday, inshallah. Okay. So चलें जी, सब आ गए हैं तो हम शुरू करते हैं. Let me quickly share my screen. So I'm going to quickly do a very quick run through of what we did yesterday. By the way, I shared the class notes yesterday, but apparently there was something wrong in the format. So I've shared that again. I hope all of you received that. और मेरी आपसे एक request है बच्चों, ये जो I don't know कि all of you, how do you come online, either through your cell phones or through your laptop, whatever the case is. लेकिन एक मेरी आपसे request है कि आप कोशिश करें कि you know when you come online and when I share all of this these questions and notes with you, आप system में उसका अपना एक folder बनाएं जरूर. Make sure that मैं आपके सामने screen share करता हूँ and I'll tell you what I mean. You have to understand, the more organized you get, the more easier it will be for you, inshallah, when you're doing the revision. So as you can see, मेरे desktop पे इस वक्त मेरे desktop पे इस वक्त मैं आपको folder दिखाता हूँ जो मेरे मुख्तलिफ sessions का चल रहा है और मैं किस तरह उसको organize रखता हूँ. So for example, this is my A levels course that I'm doing at the moment. देखिए मैंने class notes को इस तरह topic wise जिस तरह मैं करता जाता हूँ. For example, this is one topic. And then you can see I've labeled them in chronological order. Let me quickly show them to you. So for example, these are the class notes जिस तरह मैंने आपको send किए होते हैं उस तरह बाकी बच्चों को भी भेजे होते हैं. So the more organized you stay, the more it's going to be easier and good for you. Okay, so please make sure that you do that. Okay, so inshallah, we are going to be doing practice questions today for the topic that we did yesterday. और एक बात ज़हन में रखें कि इनकी practice बच्चों is way more important than the real topic itself. Okay, so all of what we discussed today, all of what I tell you today about these basically questions, you have to ensure कि आप उसको अच्छे तरीके से समझें. Okay, just give me 1 minute. पता नहीं मैंने ये बनाया है किधर चला गया. Exam style questions. Okay. File, save as PDF. Exam style questions, desktop, PDF. Okay. चलो डेस्कटॉप चले जी, ये मैंने now quickly before we jump into the exam style questions, let me do a very quick overview of all what we did yesterday. Okay, I'm sure you must have went through all of that stuff, but again, just to reiterate all of the ideas. So quickly, yesterday we started off with this idea of diffusion. ठीक है, diffusion को हमने देखा. We saw the basic ideas of concentration gradients, and then we worked through what osmosis was supposed to be, and I discussed the idea of using the word water potential instead of concentration for water for osmosis, and then quickly we went on to active transport. I think मैं कल से one note पे खोल के आपको दिखाता हूँ. PDF में दिखाता. Okay, so we went on to active transport. We saw how is it the movement of ions against the concentration gradient and all of that stuff. And then finally, we went through this idea, which is the behavior of the plant cells and the animal cells if we place them in concentrated solution या फिर distilled water. ठीक है? Both the plant and the animal cells. So inshallah, today we are beginning with the exam style questions. I have a few MCQs. असल में मैं चाह रहा हूँ कि हम theory. I want to focus more on theory. There are only 3 MCQs that I have with me today for MCQs. लेकिन inshallah, if I find time at the end of my lesson today, inshallah we will be doing some more MCQs. But let's just begin with the document that we have. Inshallah, by the end of this class, I will be sharing this document with you people, so you don't need to worry about that. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. चलो जी शुरू करते हैं. Okay, the first MCQ, as you can see on the screen, says which statements about diffusion are correct. Acha ji. So let's look at the statement first. So the first statement is molecules move from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. Diffusion की बात हो रही है. हमें पता है कि diffusion में higher to lower ही होता है, या फिर हम इसको down the concentration gradient भी कह सकते हैं, जिस तरह मैंने आपको कल बताया था. ठीक है? So apparently this seems to be correct. Okay, so let's put a tick for us here. Now, only occurs within a living system. Now, this is something we need to think about. Diffusion, is it that it only occurs in living organisms? Well, yes, we talked about ideas yesterday in which if there's this is the cell, for example, oxygen will diffuse in and carbon dioxide will diffuse out. Well, this is happening in living cells. लेकिन जो problem है इस statement के साथ वो ये वाला portion है. Only. I mean, how can we say that it's only in living cells? I mean, if you clearly remember, we saw this yesterday when we were doing diffusion. It can equally happen in water also. I mean, look at the first example that I gave. Look at the example on the left-hand side. So if you have potassium manganate particles, for example, which is something colored, it will clearly diffuse into water. So we can't say that diffusion is, excuse me, only going to occur in living organisms. So yes, it does occur in living organisms, लेकिन इस condition की वजह से, the fact that they're saying that they only occur in living organisms, that's problematic. Okay, so we will have to cross this out. Okay, and then the third one is rate slows down as temperature increases. Again, this boils down to the fact that, again, for example, if you're talking about some gas molecules, okay.
सर आपकी आवाज खराब हो रही है.
मेरी आवाज ज़्यादा खराब हो रही है? एक second. Wait. Let me change my connection to my 4G. Wait. असल में आज ना बारिश की वजह से generally signals का थोड़ा problem है. Wait. बच्चों सबको आवाज खराब आ रही है कि अनीका सिर्फ आपको खराब आ रही थी? Can I have some others telling me also?
सर अब ठीक हो
Does everybody?
आ रही आवाज.
आपको ठीक आ रही है फातिमा?
नहीं सर, मुझे भी नहीं सही आवाज आ रही थी।
अब ठीक हो गई? अच्छा चलें, अगर बीच में आवाज खराब हो जाए मुझे बता दीजिएगा, मैं अपने 4G पे स्विच कर लूंगा, बिकॉज आज जनरली बारिश की वजह से सिग्नल्स में थोड़ी डिस्टॉर्शन है। ओके चले, एनी हाउ, सो वी वर टॉकिंग अबाउट गैस मॉलिक्यूल्स। गैस मॉलिक्यूल्स आपको पता है कि दे मूव अबाउट फ्रीली like this, and the reason why they move is because they have the kinetic energy, as we discussed earlier. Okay, now if I increase the temperature, that increases the kinetic energy and therefore their movement. यहाँ पे उसने लिखा है the rate slows down as temperature increases. Well, it should actually increase when the temperature increases. So therefore, this option is also incorrect. तो अगर आप करेक्ट ऑप्शन मैच करें तो क्या बच्चों ऑप्शन आंसर क्या बनता है?
बी।
Yep, the answer is B. ठीक है, I really hope everybody understands. देखें, MCQs में एक बात ध्यान में रखें, आप देख रहे हैं मैंने कितना गंदा किया है पेपर को। आपने, if you're not scribbling on the text and not brainstorming like this, there are chances that you may do incorrect. Okay, मैं बच्चों को हंसता होता हूँ, पेपर आपका होता है, उसको जितना गंदा कर सकते हैं किया करें. Okay, it really helps in your understanding. Okay, anyhow, so let's move on. MCQ number 2. Which statements about osmosis are correct? Okay. Glucose molecules can move by osmosis. Looks very interesting. Well, osmosis का जो नाम है वो सिर्फ किसके लिए है? It's only for, come on, tell me. Water molecules. So this is incorrect. Okay. Glucose cannot, yes, glucose can move by diffusion, but not by osmosis. All right. Number 2, वैसे बाय द वे यहाँ से हमें आंसर भी पता लग गया, क्योंकि अगर 1 गलत है तो ऑप्शन ए भी गलत है, ऑप्शन बी भी गलत है, ऑप्शन सी भी गलत है. The answer is D, but let's see how is that possible. Let's see why 2 and 3 are correct. Okay. अच्छा जी, molecules pass through a partially permeable membrane. What about this idea? Molecules pass through a partially permeable membrane. Well, yes, this is true, because out of the three conditions, that Assalamu alaikum, Niaz, you're late today. It's okay. We've just started the practice for past papers, and we were just on the second MCQ. So okay. Never mind. अच्छा जी, osmosis के लिए बच्चों 3 conditions अगर आपको याद हो. The first thing is it's the movement of water molecules. Number 2, if you remember, I said it is the, so let me label that as 1. The second condition was movement down the water potential gradient. ठीक है. And the third condition was through a partially permeable membrane. Okay. So molecules pass through a partially permeable membrane. Yes, that is correct. Molecules move down a water potential gradient. Yes, that is correct. So 2 and 3, the answer is D. ठीक है जी. All right. Everybody, so far so good? किसी को कोई confusion, कोई concern, please let me know. Is everybody clear for the first 2 MCQs?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. चलें जी, बिस्मिल्लाह, आगे चलते हैं. चलें जी, now the next MCQ is really interesting. A seedling is placed with its roots in solution containing potassium ions. Okay, by the way, there's one thing that I forgot to mention yesterday. Let me tell you now. When we were doing active transport, I forgot to mention the examples of active transport. So let's add this to our notes, okay? So the examples are 2 examples जो कि आपने आप syllabus में याद रखनी है. Number 1 is absorption of mineral ions in roots, that's by active transport. और दूसरा किसी को याद है? वैसे अभी हमने वो पढ़ा नहीं, लेकिन आप, I'm sure आपने पढ़ लिया है वो. Does anybody remember the other example from human body?
Sir, विलायन में कोई होता है?
शाबाश. Absorption of amino acids and glucose. Amino acids and glucose in villi. शाबाश, ये भी active transport से होता है. ठीक है? I'm sorry, I just simply it skipped my mind yesterday to take all of this, so I apologize. Okay, coming back to the question. Now the question says a seedling, which is basically just a small seed, baby seed. A seedling is placed with its roots in a solution containing potassium ions. चलें जी, एक solution है, उसमें you have potassium ions, okay, and it is left for 48 hours, okay. और इसमें आपने एक seedling डाल दिया है, which is basically has all these roots, okay, these are the roots. All right. Now, in a solution containing potassium left for 48 hours, the relative concentrations of potassium are shown in the table. Now, there's one thing that we need to understand. If these are the roots, then they will also contain the following cells, which are the root hair cells, okay? The root hair cells. And we know about the root hair cells that they absorb mineral ions by active transport, okay? So that's the background information that we need to remember. So in this case, maybe potassium ion can be absorbed by active transport. By the way, there can be instances where they will also be absorbed by diffusion also. But by default, majority of the times, they're absorbed by active transport. Now let's make sense of this table. यहाँ पे वो कह रहा है concentration of potassium ions in the solution. Start of the experiment पे 20 थे solution के अंदर, the area that I'm highlighting as yellow. So initially there were 20, and then after 48 hours they became 18. Oh, so that is actually a reduction. तो ये जो दो two ions हैं, ये कहाँ गए? I mean, we can intelligently say, I mean, they didn't disappear anywhere. They most probably went into the roots. Okay? अच्छा जी. फिर वो कह रहा है concentration of potassium ions in the root hair cell. Initially, they were 15 at the start of the experiment. This is inside the root hair, inside the cell. And after the experiment, they were, oh wow, 35. That means that some of the potassium ions have entered the root hair cell. Now, the question is, how did potassium ions enter the cell? Let me redraw the root hair cell for you, and let me make potassium ion for you here. Now, we know by default that they are absorbed by active transport. Okay? But we need to understand, looking at the differences in concentration, how did that happen? It's very simple. Apparently, it looks difficult with these values. Like, if you really think about it, it's not that difficult. So, I want you to understand that potassium ions जो हैं वो root hair cell में initially कितने थे? Initially they were how many? Come on, tell me.
15.
15, shabash. And on the outside, there were how many? On the outside, there were 20 at the start of the experiment. ठीक है, यहाँ से मैंने देखा. अच्छा जी. So what that means was that there was higher concentration on the outside. Okay, and there was very low concentration, well, not very low, but comparatively lower concentration on the inside. So the concentration gradient was from this side to this side. Okay, acha, ye to tha before the experiment. After the experiment, the concentrations in the solution, let me change the color of my ink. Orange kar lete hain. After the experiment, on the outside, they were, in the solution, they were 18, and on the inside, they were 35. Oh, iska matlab dekhein, one thing is for sure, that isse hum movement ki direction dekh sakte hain. So, was the movement from the solution to the cell, or was the movement from the cell to the solution? X or Y? What do you think was the scenario, Bacho? Was it X or was it Y? From solution to cell or cell to solution?
X.
Exactly, from solution, because they can, initially they were 20 and inside were 15. After the experiment, bahir kam ho rahe and andar zyada ho rahe, which clearly means that the potassium ions, they've moved inside. Okay, so the movement, is it down the concentration gradient or is it against the concentration gradient? Tell me. It is down the concentration gradient. I mean, students, they got really confused with this question because they knew that the movement is supposed to be against the concentration gradient in case of root hair cells. Lekin this is an exceptional case, and you can clearly see that from the values. So what do we do with this now? हम इसको क्या करें? I mean, can we say that this is osmosis? We can clearly rule out osmosis. ठीक है? तो अब मुझे बताएं, do you think this is diffusion or do you think this is active transport? जी बच्चों, और ये मैंने जानबूझ के क्वेश्चन लिया. It's a very
सर
difficult.
active
transport
और डिफ्यूजन दोनों हो रहे हैं.
Active transport और diffusion दोनों हो रहे हैं. देखें, looking at the values बच्चों, you can clearly see कि it is the movement is from higher to lower. Okay. Lekin you have to remember that by default, active transport can also happen. Okay. The fact that the values are these does not negate the fact that active transport is happening, especially if you look at this value. देखें, अंदर 35 आ रहे हैं, ठीक है. अब बाहर initially 20 थे, अंदर इतने ज्यादा किस तरह हो सकते हैं? When apart from diffusion, they are also entering from active transport. ठीक है. So the answer has to be A. Because it can't be B and C because उसपे osmosis पे टिक हुआ हुआ है, so that's incorrect. और यहाँ पे diffusion को cross हुआ हुआ है C में, so I mean you have to choose option. ये MCQ बच्चों को बहुत मुश्किल लगा था, लेकिन it's really not difficult. If you look at the values and do all of this working, this should make super sense. ठीक है बच्चों? Are we good? Is everybody?
Yes.
Anybody who is still confused with this MCQ? Because again, as I said, I've deliberately chosen this. I chose this MCQ because इसमें apparently बच्चों को काफी problem हुआ था. But I mean, to summarize, yes, the ions, they are absorbed by active transport, but there can be instances where this can happen by diffusion. ठीक है जी, चलें जी. So this was a flavor, if you like, of how the MCQs are. बाकी इस पे बड़े easy MCQs आते हैं. Now I have some questions. Let's look at them one by one, and then inshallah we will proceed. So I think I have almost 3 or 4 questions. और questions में खास तौर पे आप देख रहे हैं कि marking scheme के साथ मैंने examiner report भी रखी हुई है, which is basically the comments of the examiner overall, how the candidates over the world they performed on this question. Okay. Now, this question is from May-June 2017, variant 2 question 9 part C. I have written that for your reference. It says compare each of the following processes, diffusion and osmosis. Ab mera aapse question ye hai, the question is straightforward. Has he specified that the comparison should be in terms of similarities or differences? What do you think? Yeah, but you think you should write in terms of both?
Both.
Exactly, because he hasn't specified. So आप दोनों context में लिख सकते हैं, ठीक है? Now, whenever you are solving a question, बच्चों, there are 2 things, बल्कि 3 things that you need to do. And since this is the first time we're looking at it, not the first time, but since we're looking at a theory question, so you need to get yourself acquainted with this way of approaching the question. The first thing is you read the question carefully. आप यकीन करें कि इतना important point मैं आपको बता रहा. I mean, you will be like, sir, क्या हो गया? ये तो बड़ा easy सी बात है. जितनी easy बात ये है, उतना ही ये कम focus चीज होती है. The students, they don't read the question carefully. You have to see what the examiner is asking from you. The second thing, so that's number 1. Number 2, you have to look at what is the glossary term that they're talking about. Is it describe? Is it explain? Is it compare? Is it suggest? And then finally, The third thing that you have to look at is the number of marks. ये three step up approach रखेंगे ना, inshallah you will never struggle with past paper questions. I repeat, number one, you read the question carefully. Number two, you look at the glossary term. And number three, you look at the marks. Now, clearly, it's a 4-mark question. 4 marker का क्या मतलब है? 4-marker question का क्या मतलब है? Do you think it means that you should just be writing 4 valid points? क्या ख्याल है बच्चों? That's a question I'm asking. Please answer. Do you
सर
think
दोनों की डेफिनेशन
नहीं बच्चे डिफाइन तो उसने कहा ही नहीं है यहाँ पे. That's exactly what
सर
I'm trying.
उसी तरह कंपेयर करेंगे ना.
अच्छा चलें ठीक है. Okay. No, but the question is, will you just write 4 points and that's it? What should you do? You be doing? देखें, एक बात याद रखें, for 4-mark question जितने marks हैं, ideally you should try and write more points than what are given in the marks, so that just in case if you get one or two, even two of them incorrect, you still get marks. Look at the marking scheme. How many marking points have they given? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. 7 marking points हैं. इनमें से आप कोई भी out of these 7, if you give any of 4 of them, you are worth for full credit. Okay, ये जो semicolon दिया होता है बच्चों marks schemes में, this means a separate marking point. Okay, so let's look at all of the points one by one. If we are comparing diffusion and active transport, तो the first point में कह रहा है it's the movement of particles / molecules named molecules. आप अगर देखें तो ये basically similarities वाली बात है. दोनों में movement है. दोनों में concentration gradient है. Again, this is in terms of similarities. Membrane requirement. Do both of them require a membrane? What do you think? That's the difference. They don't require, the diffusion does not require membrane. But active transport, आप देखें मैंने आपको कल का क्या कहा था? Living, membrane requirement. और next point देखें, living cell requirement. A living cell requirement और membrane, ये दोनों differences हैं. And we need a living because active transport is an energy requiring process. And again, you can clearly see that's the 5th marking point, which comes from respiration. And one correct example of any both of them. So yes, Anika, आप सही कह रही थी. If you just work with the definitions, you can clearly score all of these full marks. ठीक है? So I mean, they honestly work very simple ways with these questions. There's no rocket science that you can clearly see. ठीक है जी, is everybody okay with this? Anybody who has any ambiguity so far? बच्चों, come on, give me a yes or a no, please. Dead silence ना किया करें. बहुत
I got it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Jazakallah khair. Okay. Now, this is slightly recent, May, June 2019. And this is a very interesting question. Question 6 है, वो कह रहा है, define osmosis. अच्छा, so that's first part of the question. और फिर वो कह रहा है, and explain why, I'm sorry, my battery is running low. Charging को निकालने से पहले मेरा laptop बंद हो जाए. Right. Okay. All right. And it says, explain why osmosis is a special form of diffusion. Marks कितने हैं? 7 marks. Wow. So again, let's adopt the same formula. We are supposed to read the question carefully और फिर देख रहे हैं कि define भी है और explain भी है. Define osmosis and then 7 marks. So let's deal with the first part of the, I mean, if we have to define osmosis, then we need to give the 3 basic things, that it's the movement of water molecules. Water molecules की movement है. Number 2, it's down the water potential gradient. ठीक है? Through a partially permeable membrane. ppm में लिख रहा हूँ just to save time. I hope you understand. ठीक है? And explain why osmosis is a special form of diffusion. So this is a separate part of the question. I mean, although it's given in a single part, but we need to really understand why osmosis is a form of diffusion. Can you think of any of the points, class, and tell me? सोचें जरा, come on, give me your input, please, everybody. For those who never speak, please जरा अपनी mic unmute करें. गलत भी बोल रहे हैं तो कोई बात नहीं बच्चों. It's honestly okay. Come on. Why do you think it's a special form of diffusion?
It's the movement of water molecules.
Okay. लेकिन मसला ये है कि 7 marks हैं. What do we write? We need to really work through this. देखें, let me explain. Let's come to the mark scheme. Mark scheme में वो कह रहा है सबसे पहली बात it's अच्छा जी मुझे वो Zoom टाइम दिखा रहा है. चलें एक काम करते हैं before we jump onto this mark scheme. Let's take a 1 minute break इंशाल्लाह. जाएं जरा stretch कर लें थोड़ा सा इंशाल्लाह फिर हम